Hey there, welcome back to Season 1, Episode 5 of Fascinating Founders. I'm your host, Nicole Holland, and I'm thrilled to be your guide as we dive in and uncover the stories that came before the success of some of the world's most fascinating founders. Hailing from a multitude of industries and socioeconomic starts, you're going to learn what's made these fascinating men and women realize their dreams from an inspired idea to millions in revenue, disrupting, innovating, and impacting humanity for the better. You never know what's going to come up in our casual conversations, so get your notebooks ready, cozy up with a great cup of joe, and join us as I dive in to learn how these inspiring individuals have figured out how to thrive in a time where most people give up on their dreams. My guest today is Nick Peterson. He's an extraordinarily talented individual who look forward, strategize, learn, teach, connect, and develop relationships. A man after my own heart. His role is developing and investing in win-win relationships between mastery mode, its prospects, clients, and partners. With his experience in both offline and online business, he loves to share the core principles that make himself and his team successful. He does this from a unique point of view and delivers content that you can apply today to make your business better. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm not sure I'm terribly fascinating, but looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And we can only scratch the surface, unfortunately, in the short time we have together. But I think there's so many fascinating facets to you and to your history. We'll have to have you back over on the Nicole Holland show probably in the new year, so we can spend a little more time with that. But what I'd love to start out with is back before your very first business, how did you know that entrepreneurship was your calling?
I didn't. That's the most surprising answer, I think, because that's a pretty common question. I never set out to say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I set out to say, I have this, every single business that I've had at this point has been, okay, somebody has to have an answer to this problem, right? And I'm going to find it because I want to solve it. I want to be happy. And this is the thing, like this is a thorn in my side right now. And it's just been a process of learning. I traveled a lot. I spent a lot of my life homeless, some of it, circumstance, and some of it became a conscious choice at some point to say, hey, look, in order to go travel the world and really get this education, I have to, I can't afford a place to live if I'm going to travel this much. But it was a process of trying to educate myself and then apply the things that I learn. And when you do that, you learn really cool stuff. And then just almost happy accidents, people say, hey, you solve this problem. I have the same problem. Can you help me? And that's how it's been really since before I had my first business to now. I either say, yes, here's that this person can help you, and I refer out, which is why people know me as a connector. If it already exists, I'm not going to recreate it. I don't want that responsibility, to be honest. But if it doesn't exist, I do feel a moral responsibility to create it so that other people can solve the same problem. And that it's been 15 years, 14 years of that.
Awesome. So what was your first business venture, once you realized there was a problem that others were having that you could solve and you decided to monetize it? What was that one?
The very first thing was I had some body dysmorphia when I was 16. A girl broke up with me because I was lighter than her. And it seemed like the most important, when you're 16, like the most important thing in the world. So that's never going to happen again. I'm going to learn how to just get so strong and build so much muscle that'll never happen again, right? And I just spent years really like going down forums, and then you see these recurring names of like world-class experts and personal trainers. And so then I set my sights on going to spend time with them. Like go to New Jersey, Jacksonville, Florida. Like I'm going to spend time with these people. And what happened is I got a little bit stronger. I look a little bit better. I was a little more confident. And I'm a student. Like I'm hopelessly curious, and I feel like I never really have the answer, and I'm just searching for more insight, right? So what happened is I realized I cannot afford college, nor was I a great student. So I already have like a poor college record. However, when I talk about exercise, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, they listen and they spend an hour with me or more. And not only does it not cost me money, but they're paying me money. So personal training, I started at a gym, personal training, And I had no interest in personal training, but it was kind of my back door into these connections and education. And that gym shut down. Big scandal. That gym shut down, and the whole town said, hey, I was going to go, I don't know what I was going to do. And I was going to leave and figure out what I want to do next. And a large part of that town, probably 40, 50 families, said, hey, if we find you a space, like we don't want you, we're so close with your family, you're so good with our kids, or you're close with our family, will you just do your own gym? And they went and found me a space. And I said, okay. And that was my first business that I owned on my own. But again, it just came through a desire to learn and recognizing, wait a minute, I got a back door here to talk to really smart people. And I spent the next, however many years saying, okay, I'm serving these people. The next problem I had to solve was, how do I make money? Like a lot of it. And that's what I spent from age 21 is when I opened the first gym. And I was 26 when I sold it. So I spent about 5 years doing that. That was my first company that I owned. And it got to about $1 million a year, which was great for having no idea what in the world I was doing.
Awesome. And so then from there, what was the next thing? So you recognized while you were there, you wanted to make a lot of money. And if you want to touch on why, I think you were doing a lot of really neat stuff at the time. So maybe your philosophy on that, but what was that next evolution, that next thing when you shut the gym down that you decided to take on?
While I had the gym, again, the student in me, I met a kid who was 20 at the time. And he said, I'm going to get my PhD in metabolic chemistry by the time I'm 23. I mean, he's like once in a generation thinker. And I just became obsessed with like being friends with this person because he's brilliant. And I said, how can I work closer with you? He was in Arizona. I was in Florida. And he said, well, I think there's a better way to do this whole nutrition thing. And I'm going to become a doctor and I'm going to use it to help a lot of people. I said, cool, try it on me. I will do exactly what you tell me to do. And he did. And what happened is my body started changing. And I have a gym with like the whole town is members and they see that my body's changing. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm also like eating ice cream and bagels and like having fun. And so there's this huge pattern interrupt, right? And they're like, what are you doing? And I told them, well, Dr. Trevor Kashey is teaching me this. So for like 6 months, they heard about this guy. I don't think they believed that he existed. And then he came down and did a seminar and blew everybody away. And like a week later, he moved to Florida and moved into my house. And he said, you're the only person that understands what I'm saying, but can also break it down and like make it palatable and articulate it to other people in a way that actually changes their behavior. So like, if you can help me make money with this, then I will just live with you and teach you anything you want. And that was the next venture we did. We actually opened a nutrition company while I had the gym. And so that was where the skill, building a brick and mortar was super natural to me. I'm a connector. I love to connect with people's families. I wasn't close with mine, so it was really natural. The nutrition company was a different animal because it was remote. And so as I leveraged myself out of the gym, we're trying to run this nutrition, and I feel this obligation to make a ton of money because this dude moved his whole life and his PhD to Florida. I got into a lot of coaching programs, how to run paid traffic, how to build an online this, how to build online that. And to me, marketers and salespeople are so good at marketing and sales, they sold me the dream. One of the reasons I sold the gym was to chase this shiny new internet marketing object, right? And I frankly floundered around miserably for a while because direct response advertising is not aligned with my unique disposition. So I had built this great gym, then tried this nutrition company and was failing miserably. I spent about a year and a half really just trying to explore, why can I not make this work? Was the first thing a fluke? And so that was really, I spent a year and a half, 2 years. My next venture was figuring out, how do you build something remote that doesn't have the benefit. There's a huge benefit in brick and mortar. There's this geo component, right? Like word of mouth travels really fast in a small town. And so that the next thing was a nutrition company, floundered miserably. And I finally said, you know what? This isn't working. I know that the internet marketers have it all figured out, but it's not working. I'm just going to do it the way I know how to do it. And we took off immediately. And that's really when I started making like way more money than I ever imagined that I would make. So that's pretty cool.
I love that. I think it's so important that
we honor who we are. I've experienced similar stuff in the last years, or the first few years of my business, I should say, especially, where I was doing the same thing, getting the programs, hiring the mentors, joining the masterminds, and trying to make myself fit into their success strategy or whatever. And that's a big part of why I have the podcast Fascinating Founders, because it's like, I think once we go through trying to do it their way, also at the same time striving for self-awareness and development, personal development, it's like, wait a minute, the more I can do me, the more we can do our own thing, the more success we have, the more people we get aligned with who are also disruptors, who are also doing their own thing and not following the status quo. And they're softer and quieter and kind of more behind the scenes and having an impactful presence on the world. And I think more people like you need to be acknowledged and known about and shared. And your philosophy is amazing. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like how, when you started doing your own thing differently than the big marketers were telling you, how that shift happened? Rather, like, was it just overnight all of a sudden, or like what were some of those awarenesses that you came to?
There's something to be said for what I call the science of hindsight, which is, in theory, all this stuff is supposed to happen if I do X, Y, Z. It was a process of first saying, you know what, it was almost like I give up, and then, which means I'm just gonna go through the motions, just be myself. Like it's all doomed anyway. And then we started making money, and now this is what I talk to people about all the time. A lot of us, especially repeat achievers, visionaries, are probably the biggest culprits. We do a thing and it works, and we're like, cool, that thing worked, and then we go find the next thing. And what the science of hindsight does is, instead of like trying to forecast the next thing that's going to work, let's go back and look at the stuff. Like let's look at our best client that we have right now. All right, it's this person. Where'd they come from? Well, I met them. This is a real story, by the way. I met them at Einstein's. I was sitting at Einstein's having a bagel, and they were like, how do you have a bagel and look like that? Right? So what we did, and if you go to like my Facebook and stuff, you can see it's really cool. I said, Brandon, who was my assistant, I said, no more phone calls with me, no more meetings with me. If somebody wants to talk, tell them I'm at Einstein's every Sunday from 9 to noon. We started having lines out the door, and they asked us to park across the street at the Publix. But that's a science of hindsight. Instead of going, oh, that works, that's cool, now let me build a funnel, you say, wait a minute, that works. Can we build a system around this thing? So that's really what it looks like, is kind of being yourself. And then every now, whether it be weekly, monthly, daily, quarterly, reflecting on, all right, what's going well? And then trying to trace that back to like, wait a minute. For example, I'll give you a real world example right now. We look back and say, wow, the first touch with these 3 clients who are our best clients came when they heard me on someone else's podcast. So instead of building a funnel right now, it stands to reason that bandwidth is better used based on the evidence at hand in trying to book more podcasts. And now here I am, right? So that's really the process. It's just like, instead of operating from theory and like, I get it, marketers are compelling, they sell a great dream. Operating off of evidence, real world evidence. When I do this, people come into my Facebook group and buy stuff. I don't care how. There's a book called Blue Fishing. I don't know if you've read it, but
Of course.
okay. So people read Blue Fishing. Somebody came into my mastermind, 65 grand a year. Said, I read Blue Fishing and I loved it. And I went down like the Steve Sims rabbit hole, and I see you're good friends with him. And then I started looking at your stuff, and I see Steve is in your mastermind. And so I just had to join. I do anything I can to find an excuse to get people to read Blue Fishing now, right? That's not an internet marketing funnel. It's just using the evidence. And I've had multiple people that have come into my Facebook group, and I'll be like, who wants my favorite business book of all time? I'll send it to you for free. Send out 60 copies of Blue Fishing, and I get one $65,000 client. That's the science of hindsight. That's just doing the things. My strength is making friends with people like Steve. So why not build a system around that?
That is flippin' brilliant. And I'm a huge fan, obviously, of Steve Sims. For anyone who's been following me, Steve's been on the Business Building Rockstar Summit, Business Building Rockstar Show, the Nicole Holland Show. Well, we're surely going to have him on Fascinating Founders. Amazing man, brilliant. And I love that, how close you guys are and what you're doing with him. And so, Nick, if you could sum up your very best advice for a business owner that wants to follow in your footsteps in under 60 seconds, what would you tell them?
Two things. And again, not as actionable as I would like it to be, but I lack the context for each individual listener, right? The first is you can't win a race you don't want to be in. The sooner you learn that, the better. And all that means is that the level of success that you achieve is going to depend entirely on how aligned your pursuits stay with your unique disposition. If you play in your strengths, you have a massive, massive advantage. And if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. It's probably the best thing I can tell you. There's service providers spending so much time trying to market and sell. And frankly, there's also marketers and salespeople that are spending too much time trying to provide service when they should just be marketing and selling people's stuff. Really understanding where you fall will, get into multiple seven figures that way is not hard as long as you stay aligned.
Thank you so much. That was great. And I appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom with us today that you have. I know there's so much more. And again, love to have you back on the Nicole Holland Show as well. You mentioned your Facebook group, and there's other ways to connect with you and podcasts and so on. So I'd love to turn the mic over to you to leave our listeners with, number one, how they can connect further with you, and also anything else that you just want to share with us before we wrap up.
Yeah. Best way to connect is probably the Facebook group, which is Profit and Productivity, or the podcast, which is Productivity and Profit. I have no idea why they're in different orders, but I just
covering all your bases, right?
Yeah. And second, I think the people that struggle the most are real experts, because real experts know the answer is that it depends, right? Which makes it really hard to craft compelling marketing messages. A lot of good marketing messages are also not entirely true, and they're kind of ambiguous, and experts cannot stand ambiguity. So, and this is not really this was not planned, but it's a thought that I have right now. If you are really, really good at what you do, I think the best thing you can do is interviews and podcasts, because your expertise shows when you answer the next question, right? Anybody can put together a webinar that sounds really compelling. So I just want to leave. I think that's the highest leverage thing for most people I talk to, because they're frustrated. Like, I'm smarter than that person. I'm better than that person. And they're making more money than me. Get on as many interviews, Facebook groups, and podcasts as possible. And I think that's how you cut through the noise. You show your expertise by answering the next question.
Thanks again to Nick for being my guest on today's show and for sharing his founder's journey with us. We'll have links for you to connect directly with him, resources discussed, plus the full transcript of this episode and more at fascinatingfounders.com. Remember that successful people surround themselves with successful people. And until next time, this is Nicole Holland signing off.